Ghost, and I'm a podcaster on Anchor FM. And we have Bandit Lu, who is a sound and visual artist and producer based out of Brooklyn, New York. He crafts scenic soundscapes with modular synthesis mixed with pianos and other acoustic instruments. And we're going to get into the podcast right now. So, when did you first get into music? At like what age?
So I think I got into music around maybe 7 or 8. I was classically trained to read sheet music. I wasn't really classically trained to play jazz or improvise, but I read a lot of sheet music for my piano teacher at the time. He was a older man, and I think he really just enjoyed the company and just having, his students play him songs that he loved to hear. And yeah, that's where I kind of learned how to be expressive. He was really on top of us for just being really expressive, and not just reading the sheet music and more about interpreting it in our own way and, putting our own little zest to it. But
I think that's great about teachers, because I was in a concert band when I was young, and I started on clarinet, and I was in the wind section of like a concert band, and then later I got to be in a marching band, and the difference was the marching band was kind of more like jazz, because we would learn the song, and then we were allowed to kind of just bring our expression to it. And I always liked leaning toward like the marching band and the jazz band were more like, I loved that. And the classical band, the concert band was cool because it taught you, structure and taught you like the basics. But it is like in terms of just the passion of it, the expressiveness of just going out there and having a little more feel. I understand where you're coming from there.
Yeah, I actually played the clarinet also. I think we basically did the same thing. I didn't really get into jazz till much later in my music journey, but I did play band middle school and high school, and I did partake in the marching band, so it was kind of fun. It was different, but I think I've back to the expressiveness, I always kind of really paid attention to that for whatever reason. I think that was the fun part of playing music, and it just adds a little bit of something that you really can't put your finger on, but you can definitely feel it when you listen to someone who's really good on an instrument.
Yeah, I mean, it's been the whole dynamic in my career in music has been to kind of go into very experimental, kind of off-kilter, progressive type stuff that kind of merges multiple genres. And a lot of it is kind of feel-based. All the bands I've ever been in have been more like jam bands or progressive bands that try to do innovative kind of, changing the key and changing the tempo in the mid song and going into another song and then coming back and just, doing that rather than trying to be like a pop band.
Yeah.
Or having like a punk aesthetic to be a little bit more emotional than to be more pop oriented. The pop ideas like the Beatles, those are cool ideas to have structure. But I've kind of spent most of my career trying to do kind of very unstructured stuff.
Yeah.
But so you started, on the piano. You're classically trained. You had a teacher that was trying to get you to like get into that feel. When did you realize that you had a talent for like creating your own music, like writing your own tunes? Because some people get into music and they become a session musician, they become like a concert classical musician or a cover band. Like, when did you think that you wanted to like write your own compositions?
I think probably college, like after my piano lessons and after band. I basically stopped being in band I guess my senior year in high school. And, by that time, my piano teacher, already passed, so I kind of just I didn't really play much, I had a friend who was very much into music production, making beats at the time. And I remember it going over and he showed me Fruity Loops. And I was like, oh, this is cool. But it never really inspired me to do anything more. And I think for whatever reason, you know, sometime, in college, freshman year in college, I got like I bought a MacBook, like those white plastic
Hmm.
MacBooks, and it had
Yeah, I remember those.
yeah, it had GarageBand on it, and I started playing around with GarageBand. And I was like, oh, this is fun, just putting drum beats over acapellas and things like that. Nothing too crazy. And from there, I just gradually got deeper and deeper um, into it. Learning more. I found Reason, um, right? Propeller had Reason. I think it was like Reason 3 or Reason 4, and I
Hmm.
made a few things on there. And then I found Ableton, and I got into, yeah. I mean, it was just a rabbit hole, right? I just
So you started on the GarageBand and you were in the DAW in the digital audio workstations. What made you make the jump to like the hardware modular kind of rabbit hole?
uh um I I think I started out on GarageBand, banging away on like just the typing keyboard, nothing too crazy. And then when I got Reason, I was like, oh, there are these things called MIDI controllers. I remember like I found like a cheap used Axiom. It's like the Axiom
Hmm.
49. It was really janky. It was half broken, and I wasn't a fan of the key bed on it, but it did its job. It had a little drum pad, and I got into Ableton, and then I got my first sampler, which was the SP404.
Oh, that's a great one.
and
That's a good one. That's like the classic one.
and then I picked up like an Alesis Micron, and that was my first like hardware synth. I remember seeing
Hmm.
watching Dorian Concept. I don't know if you're familiar with Dorian Concept. I don't know if he's still making music, but he's he was like,
He used that. He used that a lot.
yeah, he had like these awesome YouTube videos where, I mean, he's clearly a very good jazz keyboardist, um to begin with, but the stuff he was cranking out of like the Alesis Micron and the Micro Korg, just playing, it was just like really inspiring. So, I was able to get my
Hmm.
hands on a Micron, and then it's just a rabbit hole. I had
I'm kind of interested in your modular gear. What's like the first
so
modular rig you
modular
got?
is pretty recent. I've been making music for almost 10 years now. I definitely started in synthesis. I made a lot of beats. I went through a sampler phase where I, was obsessed with like trying different samplers. And then I finally got like a Nord piano. And then I was really interested in just, pianos, and just,
Hmm.
classic drum breaks and organic sounds. And recently, I was just looking for something different. I took a hiatus from making music for, I would say almost 3 years. And, coming back into it, um, I still have some of my synths, but I was like, I want to try something different. I remember reading up on, modular, I think what it was is, I was trying to do more experimental music, less percussion
Yeah.
driven. I think I was a little
Hmm.
burnt out from making quote unquote beats.
Beats.
And
Yeah.
I was like, I want something to like explore. And I was watching a lot of videos on modular synthesis. I got like an app, use VCV rack. And then I was like,
Hmm.
I should just take the plunge. And I got a little make noise skiff. And
Oh, cool. Do you have a maths?
yes, I love maths. Actually, I have two
Yeah.
maths. it
I just got the Morphogene, so I have a maths and a
Yeah,
Morphogene.
I mean, the maths and the morphogene are a nice combo. You can do a lot of different stuff. But yeah, it's just, slowly kind of just getting
Hmm.
lost in the design process. And
Well, I think it gets you kind of back in the day because like I'm in my 50s, right? So I kind of grew up with bands like Yes and Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and I used to look at Keith Emerson and his big Moog Model 55 rig, right?
mm-hmm.
And that's like the Model 2s and Model 1s, and I used to like, wow, that's what I want, right? So
Yeah,
when Moog put out the Mother 32, and then they put out the DFAM, I went and got like a skiff from like an Arturia
yeah,
6U, and I loaded those two in with my Make Noise Morphogene and my Mass. And then I put like a Pittsburgh modular uh, 4x4 VCA mixer,
okay,
and then I linked it to an Arturia Mini Brew 2S, and then I linked it to a grandmother, and then I linked it to a System 1M, and then I started going down a real rabbit hole with my Juno and all my other stuff. But it's just what I liked about it was the ability to kind of build your own tones, and with all the LFOs and all the different tricks you can do with modular, just creating analog
yeah,
clips or analog sequences that with the maths you can go crazy with how you can manipulate that. And I just found that was so satisfying compared to sampling or compared to just using straight pads out of my
mm-hmm.
Juno. I say, that is something I wanted. And it kind of goes back to the original birth of subtractive synthesis was done on machines like that had no
Yeah,
keyboards. That's where it started. So it's kind of going full circle with all these people in the modular.
yeah. It is crazy, and I think the other aspect of what intrigued me with modular is self-generating. Um,
Yeah,
rhythms, and I've been trying to delve more into that, just using things to modulate different control voltages to kind of just,
like self-resonating.
well, even just, like modulating, my sequencer rate division to give it like swing, just modulating
Oh yeah, yeah. Your mats are
the
good for
filter
that.
cutoffs, and especially on the morphogene, you can literally automate
Yeah.
like almost every single function. I have a tempi that I use with the morphogene, and I
Hmm.
just route everything into
Yeah.
the CVs, and it yeah, you just literally just play one riff and you let morphogene kind of do its thing. You put it through a reverb.
Yeah, I like the
Yeah,
randomization with it. Like when you morph it, you can have something at one speed, and then by the time it gets into it, start slowing it or speeding it up. And if you rewire it, you trigger it with LFOs from something else, you can have all kinds of other things going on. So what I like about the Make Noise products is it kind of brings like East Coast and West Coast synthesis together. If you're into that Buchla
mm-hmm,
style versus the Moog
mm-hmm.
style, it seems like the Make Noise products kind of bridge that. Like if I'm on my Moog, I'm stuck on East Coast subtractive synthesis. But as soon as I get into my Make Noise products, then suddenly I can start doing
Yeah,
Buchla-esque stuff.
absolutely.
Which do you find that you like the Buchla style, or you don't? You just kind of go wherever you want to
Um,
go versus like what East Coast, West Coast? Do you have any kind of consideration on that?
so I also have um a Moog matriarch, and
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. I got a
I
grandmother,
mean,
but
when I heard the grandmother, it was just, I used to have a little fatty. That was my first Moog ever. That was like my, huge.
that's a great mode. That's a great
It,
mode to have. I mean, every mode has its own character. It's actually still you don't have to get rid of it. You can still use
I mean,
it.
I sold it off. It just didn't do it for me. I found.
But a matriarch can pretty much do it. It can do it. You can make it do it. Whatever it did, you can get the matriarch to
Yeah,
do it.
but it's like, it's just like the Model D and stuff like that. It's like, oh man, I want the Model D just for like the raw tone, but then you
Yeah,
realize there's like, what is it, like Contact Monarch, I think is what it's called. You play that, you're like, oh, this sounds good
yeah,
enough. But
yeah.
even now, like Behringer, I got the Boog from my brother-in-law, and I mean,
We got the
no,
Poly
I
D.
got the single voice one.
Oh, the single voice
But
one.
I
Yeah.
mean, it's like, man, I don't need to dish out 5K for I mean, maybe in the
No.
future if I just end up with like absolute infinite, flexibility with my finances. I would buy.
Well, Moog 1, 16 voice Moog 1, that's like my holy grail. Between that and the
Yeah.
Prophet 10, I kind of go back and forth every day. Like, which one would I get? If I was going to get one. And one day, I'm saying that, well, having 3 synths with 16 voices on top of each other, that's kind
Yeah.
of cool. And then you start thinking about the way the 10 sounds. It doesn't sound like the Moog, and the Moog doesn't sound like it. So you kind of have to make a decision which direction, kind of like whether or not you wanted to use a Jupiter or an OBX,
Yeah.
right? The different you could all use them all, and they all have different, like getting a guitar, like different models of guitars. You get them for certain reasons, right? And I think you when you get those synths, you kind of picking like a brand or a style of synthesis that evokes something like, oh, I want to do a Duran Duran type of thing, so I want a Jupiter 8, right? Or I want something that's more, like Eddie Van Halen, so I want to go get a, Overheim.
Yeah.
But you never know what you want, so you try to find someone. Well, can I find something that can do everything? And there's never anything that does everything.
Yeah. The other thing is too, it's like, I've gone through phases where I've pared down a lot of gear and then, got an influx of gear, then pared down again. And, I used to be like, oh, I want everything out. But now after every session, I put everything away. So I'm very deliberate in what I choose, to give myself, a limitation. Different way to go. But, like the Moog sound, I mean, it just fits my, like, especially the matriarch.
It fits your aesthetic.
Like the grandmother and the matriarch. It's like when I heard the oscillators, the recordings of the oscillators.
Yeah, there's nothing like those.
Compared to the little fatty, like these made me feel.
Well, the spring reverb does it for me.
Yeah.
On grandmother, what you can do with that real spring reverb, I find new ways to use it like every day. And then the FM synthesis implementation on it, it's not like a DX7, but it does some really cool stuff that I never, like the Model D doesn't do that. And so that in itself, I was kind of torn between getting that and the Matriarch, but I really wanted that spring reverb because there was certain stuff I wanted to do. And so, but the Matriarch is one that I was lusting after. I did want it. But limitations, I think another thing I like is the reason I bought a DFAM was because I like the limitations on that drum machine. Because those limitations actually give you more ideas.
Absolutely. It gives you a creative way to work with it. And, it's a little more, you just get something different out of it. But
I mean, lately I've been taking a Teenage Engineering OPZ and then sampling the beats on it into my Morphagene.
Nice. That's cool.
And then running the maths to like change the beats totally by using the math to really alter the sample from the OPZ.
Oh, that's cool.
And I find it's like taking that kind of, I like to take things. I will take something from my Juno and sample it. And I'll take my, the LFOs off my Arturia Minibu 2S and have that run the DFAM. It's just like so many different ideas. Like sometimes I just pull all my wires out. Like I'll have something patched up and I'll take a picture of it, put it in my little book, and then I'll just start all over again.
I usually unpatch after every session and just start fresh. I put everything away at the end of every session. It's like, at least for the modular stuff, it's if I'm working on a long-term project, or if I was, someone commissioned me to do something, it's a different story. But, with modular stuff, I think the fun in it is the unexpected accidents and just the.
Yeah, I think I always tell people that my modular gear is like a member of the band, right? Because like when I turn on my Moogs, it's like I don't know what you guys are going to give me today, but I kind of go with where they're going. So it's like I start playing with something, and then it's like, okay, I'm going to go with that instead of trying to make it sound like somebody else. What I did, I was talking to this guy before, and he said, you let the instrument be what it is, right? And if you let the instrument be what it is, then I saw like a review of the new Strega,
Yeah.
from make noise. And one of the a lady on the YouTube that was talking about saying she was trying to make it sound like a bukla, but it wasn't doing what she thought it was going to do. And then suddenly she said, "Well, I'm just going to let it be what it is." And once she let it be what it is, then she said, "Okay, now I understand what this thing does because I'm not trying to make it into an
Yeah, I
easel."
mean, they're all tools with its quirks. Um, it depends what you want, and it depends on the person's style of producing or creating. With modular stuff, yeah, it's like I like using, the CVs, Tempe and the LFOs to kind of crank out something, and then I'll work around it, make a tune out of it. And I think it's a little bit of a break from my usual production, which is start with make a drum loop, add a chord progression.
Yeah, that's like the traditional. The traditional everything starts with the drums. I was talking to some guy, and he said he spends like 2 months on
Yeah.
the drums, and I can see that because a lot of producers I've talked to, they spend all their time trying to get the kicks and the snares and the cymbals and the hi hats. They spend tons of time doing that, and I understand why, because if you get that right, then you pretty much have a hit.
Yeah, it's a lot of rhythm based music. It's like it's all in the drums. If you can, just hearing drum, like drum circles, like you don't need much to really move somebody. It's like yeah,
My whole thing is like if you can get it to sound as good as a Motown drummer, then you're probably in the right
yeah,
way. Because like I always go back to the Motown like Stax
hmm
soul drummers and what they could do in three
oh yeah,
minutes. And what they did is like it seems very simple, but when you look at their styles, like Purdy
yeah,
Shuffle from Motown, is like there's certain techniques they had that within those 3 minutes are like they're very hard to replicate. Just because they had this human factor and this ability that came from jazz, that came from the blues, and then it got brought into soul and soul pop, and that's where everybody's trying to get that kind of hit beat that these Motown guys could just, like the Funk Brothers, they could just do it, but there's this. When I was listening to Bedtime Zen
hmm
that you have out there, and it's kind of what I like because it's like a 44-minute like progressive kind of rock type of thing, and I like how you use noise at the
hmm
beginning. You have all this kind of white, pink noise, blue noise, however you want to describe the noise. Everybody has different aspects of how they describe pink noise or white noise. But do you find that you like to use noise in modular experiments for that type of feel?
I think my aesthetic usually has a layer of noise. I think it just fills a certain spectrum. It kind of fills out the spectrum, at least for my aesthetic. So yeah, I mean, I like using noise. Yeah, it just kind of it's like a
The kind of percussive nature of noise. I mean, I think when you're using like Moogs and analog gear, there's a very interesting percussive nature to like the analog waveforms or the analog
yeah,
noise compared to like maybe digital noise. It just has this warmth to it, like everything that's analog. And there's ways that you can use it that can be unexpected or can be kind of like a shadow track, or they can be like they can just bring to the whole picture, like you want like Phil Spector layering,
yeah,
right, of your composition, and noise is like it is like a floor of it. People will go back and use old tape machines to get the hiss, you know, to get this kind of noise floor into the recording, because that they want that aspect to be there because bring a character to the song.
yeah. I mean, like my
Um,
older work, what I would do is that at the very end, I would sample some, noise, and I would stretch it out, and I would just put it slightly above, or like slightly before you don't hear it anymore, like the audio level.
Out of your
And
range, yeah, get it kind of slightly out of your
and
range,
I'll
yeah.
bit crush it to make it a little more crunchy and fuzzy, and it, at least for me, I think it adds something. It's the it's like when you talk about like Bernard Purdy, drumming, and the old Motown drummers, what makes a mo or what makes Bernard Purdy different than a drum
Yeah.
machine. right? Like a TR-808.
Yeah, it's that human
There's,
factor.
I
Yeah.
mean, it's not even just the human factor. It's just like the little details. And I've been,
Boy, his are
yeah,
genius, I
like the
guess.
ghost notes, the different types of hits, just like the little things that, like the little details that you really can't produce on, an EXO, step sequencer, right? Um, and I think that's, I've been on the search for like a nice, like the perfect drum machine that I could use with my modular, you know. But at
Mhm.
the end of the day, it's like I like playing the drum, like hitting, finger drumming
Finger
because
drumming. Yeah,
yeah, because
on a
there's just
set.
like the swing, like I'm very particular about, my drums and the timing, and in some cases I can make a drum machine work, but it's like it's too rigid and it's too sterile. Like, one of my influences, J Dilla, his, and even Flying
Mhm.
Lotus. It's like their drum beats are not necessarily sloppy, but it's loose, and there's a
Yeah.
push pull, and there's something interesting about it. You hear a four on the floor kick drum and a snare on every two. That doesn't really move me. I mean, sometimes it does, but
Well, that's boy. I think I always liked like Moon,
yeah.
Keith Moon, because if you think about Keith Moon in the
Hmm.
Who, he never kept time. He basically was soloing through every Who track, and he's not a traditional drummer. He basically was a solo
Yeah.
lead drummer, and the same thing with like Mitch Mitchell with the Jimi Hendrix Experience. And I like that kind of sloppiness. It's kind of like the way Keith Richards doesn't play a straight rhythm guitar.
Hmm.
You know, he has this kind of bluesy, kind of off kilter, a little bit off the beat. It's kind of chaotic. It's kind of like when you listen to Neil Young and Crazy Horse on Tonight's the Night, and it's that kind of chaos. It's kind of like that glitchy
Yeah.
beat. I've always been into the type of rock music that's very glitchy, or it's kind of off kilter, like the Velvet Underground. Um, and that kind of imperfection is the
Well,
perfection for
yeah. I
me.
mean, that's what I'm talking about. That's like the little detail that um makes it a little, I can go on and on about this, but I think it's like what makes a loop boring is that you don't change it up. You can do, I did, on my other alias, Andy Ongulous, I
Roger.
have a track called Vibe Out. And it was kind of an experiment where, all I did, it was the same melodic loop, the same sample, just over and over again. The time signature is a little wonky, so it doesn't really line up, but I just cut up like a dozen drum breaks, and I just,
Oh, and you cut them around,
yeah,
voice
I
them
put
in.
each, I just sequence, play the first loop, then play the second loop, then play the third loop. So throughout the whole song, it was just, after, 4 to 8 bars, it would switch the drum loop. And what's interesting is that, in loop based music, if you just change something, like a little thing, it won't ever get boring because, once you hear like 8 bars, your brain is going to say, hey, I know what to predict. I don't need to pay attention anymore. This is boring.
That's why I like the
Yeah.
polyrhythmic stuff, like the subharmonicon. Like this, if you take a subharmonicon with its
Hmm.
polyrhythm generators, and then you link that
Yeah.
to like a DFAM, and then you run it through like a morphogene, then you. What I tend to do is I use DFAMs and put a lot of
Hmm.
randomness into my DFAMs. So the limitation of only being able to do 8 steps, but then having it run through the morphogene, and then I glitch it out a little bit. So I try to get it to sound more organic by creating kind of this glitchiness or changing the tempo or being more progressive, like a band like Yes, actually
Yeah.
changing it and triggering it to change to a slower beat and then coming back and then going. And then it doesn't do what you see like in trap and EDM and all these other types of electronic music today that say that they're the electronic music form. But if you go back to like original electronic music, it was never just like 4 on the 4 all the doing that same thing all the time. It was
Yeah. There's
always
always a
experimental.
progression. And I think the
Um,
main thing is keeping the listener's brain, not necessarily conscious brain, but unconscious brain, kind of on its toes. And I think,
Well, I think it's the difference between dance music and electronic music. Is that there's a type of electronic
Yeah.
music that's dance music, but then there's a type of electronic music that's always been progressive and
Mhm.
experimental, and that is not necessarily going to get the dance crowd
There's a place
into
and
it.
time for
It's going
everything.
to
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a different type of vibe. It's a different crowd. The modular crowd will go 20 minutes, 40 minutes into like ambient
Hmm.
feedback, and all kinds of strangeness that, that's not going to get the dance crowd going, but some guy in Berlin or Paris in a small club is
Yeah.
going to be into that, and so it's a different niche market, what you're trying to do. You do backgrounds in movies and films and TV. You're more, doing stuff that's kind of not that it's background music. It can be Brian Eno-esque. You look at what
Yeah.
Eno does. I'm a big fan of Brian. It's like that is kind of where the world I like to be in. Because I think it just
Hmm.
leaves it open and expansive. The whole idea of expansive sound is that you're gonna pull some jazz in, pull some rock in, pull some hip hop, some soul, whatever you feel like, and you just do what you feel you want to do at the moment, wherever serves the song.
Absolutely.
You, yeah, I mean, you're saying I saw you're influenced by J Dilla and Thom Yorke. I think that's a really good name check because you listen to
Oh
Radiohead
yeah.
records. And I also hear some kind of Wilco, like Yankee Hotel Foxtrot type of stuff going on. Summer Teeth
I'm not
type of
familiar
work.
with them.
Um, well, they do somewhat like Radiohead type of work. They're kind of an experimental American rock band that started off as a
Okay.
country rock band, and then with Yankee Hotel Foxtrot
Okay.
is their most famous album. It's a really glitched out rock record that does. They wrote the record and then they deconstructed the record and ended up doing backward tape looping and like
Hmm.
George Martin type production. It's kind of deconstructed almost every song and added all these layers of strange tape loops and backward vocals, and it became a very experimental record.
Oh, interesting.
The record company didn't even want to put it out, but Rolling Stone said it was like one of the best records of the 2000s. And if you like
Oh
Radiohead, I
yeah, I'll
think you'd
check them
like it.
out.
So I do hear some of that, and some of your like escapism and bedtime zen. You've got some aspects that have that sound, which I'm totally into, like the loose rhythms and the lush
Hmm.
subharmonics. But yeah, it just seems like I'm always going down that modular rabbit hole because it's kind of where I live. Um, but it's hard today, with so many people trying to do 2-minute songs. I was kind of very heartened when I saw your 44-minute song.
Yeah, I mean, it's there.
you know,
Like I said, I've been trying really hard to take a departure from my old habits. And I think the thing is with like self-generating, even using like, sequencers and randomizing the sequencers, I'm just trying to more or less, break habits of like the chords, the common chords I play, on the piano. It's like I'm just trying to, that's why I made, Bandit Lu in general is just like I don't want to do what I normally know how to do. I want to do something
yeah,
completely different. I started adding percussion again, and it was like kind of sounding like what my other stuff sounded like. And I was like, maybe I should just not do it anymore. But but like percussion, I think percussion it adds another dimension. It's not necessary, but I think,
yeah,
I kind of want to add a little something more other than, ambient, trances, right? So
yeah.
I think I'm juggling and struggling on finding a way to make something different. And
Well, I think like what you do with the morphogene, what I love about the morphogene is like I've been doing a lot of rhythmic stuff with the morphogene,
mhm,
using it like a drum machine. And I find that if you're doing stuff where you're like, okay, I don't want drums, but then if you take the morphogene and you do what it does with drums, it kind of gives you what you were looking for. You didn't want that predictable beat. You want
mhm,
something that's a little off. And I think I found that using something like the OPZ to give me the beat, right? And I could build a very structured beat on the OPZ, but then I bring it into the morphogene, and then suddenly I can just totally rip it
yeah,
up. And that's been between that and the DFAM. I've been using those. I mean, I have 808s and 909s and 727s, and sometimes I go back to those because I want to make a more traditional song. But I find in the last 6 months, I've been in my DFAM OPZ morphogene mode, just because I find that I like the unexpected coming out of these machines compared to the expected stuff I get out of my 909s and my 2727s and stuff like that.
I think I should get another morphogene. I think that's what this is turning into. The conclusion. I should get another morphogene.
It's like people get like 2 or 3 DFAMs, and then when you have like 3 of them on top of each other, you it's kind of like you got this super like analog drum machine. They cost you like $1,800.
You know, I've been trying to focus on less is more. I went through a phase of 2 or 3 years. You know, this is on my other alias, Andy Ongulous, is you know, I went down a rabbit hole of the Roland samplers, like the SP series, and I discovered the SP303. This is before.
That's like the great machine. Everybody uses that. That's
this is before I knew about Madlib, really. But what I loved about the SP303 was that you can resample the pads while sampling an external input. So it's essentially, a 2-track in one box. So
yeah, I think that's why a lot of people like that machine, because you can use them live, and you kind of use like a DJ, and I've seen a lot of people use them.
Yeah, so like I just made music with just literally electric pianos and a drum break. I'll chop up the drum break, use those drums, make my own drum break, and then just resample and record, me playing the piano and just using the onboard effects and just really mangling it. And, that was a lot of fun. I didn't need like all the plugins that I had. I was living in a smaller space. I was living in just like a tiny bedroom in Brooklyn at the time. And and I made a lot of music just on that. And it was a lot of fun.
A lot of people don't realize, I started with like a Casio CZ101 and a Tascam 4-tracker. And I just kept on overdubbing stuff on the tape.
It's the greatest feeling.
And just having that little CZ101, that thing was a little powerhouse. It was like the cheapest way to get into like subtractive synthesis back in the day, and it actually could do it. And so then and I would just go and I mute and unmute my Tascam and play to it at shows. So I actually had my Tascam. I'd put down like a drum track on it, and then I'd maybe mute the bass line and then play the bass line live, and then let some of the other things come through and kind of mute and unmute tracks. And I seen a guy from I think Alexander Cortini from 9 Inch Nails. He actually does that for some 9 Inch Nails songs. He actually has like a Tascam on stage, and he has tape cassettes, and he unmutes and mutes tracks on his Tascam while he's doing his music directing.
It's awesome.
It's just an alternative method. He said he liked it better than his computer because he knew it was not going to crash on him. That he was going to be able to do it. And I kind of do the same thing with my I use like a Zoom R24. So I use my Zoom R24 like a Tascam 24. And I'll just mute and unmute tracks, and it's like dead reliable because it's never going to have a CPU crash.
It's a simpler machine.
Yeah, so if you go to play live, I played live in New York with it, and I had like a BeatStep Pro running like 808 stuff on top of it, and then I had my modes and all my other stuff. But I was able to do a one-man show, running all these like different things, like different sequencers, running on different time signatures, running with the tape, and you're able to do this kind of, experimental kind of modular show that feels different than a DJ. Because you still have the live, experimentation and also being able to just, you kind of riff. And so I could take my bass song and then I could kind of go wherever I want to go with it and not be stuck to like some Ableton Live thing that I'm kind of stuck in.
Yeah. I mean, I think it all comes down to Like I know producers who only used Ableton Live and only the Ableton Live stock tools, and they make amazing, amazing music. Um, but I think it just comes down to preference. You know, I
Yeah, I mean, it's I think I mean it's like I guess I grew up in the world of
yeah.
having the hardware, and so I tend to be more of a hardware guy because I just have a better experience with it, and I do appreciate there are guys that can use these DAWs in very creative ways.
Mm-hmm.
Not that you can't. It's just it's like a personal preference. I like having all the controls of these modular synths and even hardware analog synths. That to
Yeah,
me is the
it's a
playing
different
surface.
experience, I think.
It's a different thing, and it's just a choice I make to be able to do that. Not that you can't control a DAW and have all kinds of MIDI
Mm-hmm.
controllers doing the same thing, but it's just something about when you have a real Moog, like with your matriarch or a grandmother. It's something about when you play that live. There's some things you can't replicate from performance to performance, and that's kind of what I like about it.
The only thing about the matriarch is, I was like, oh, I don't need presets or save presets, and then yeah, it's like
Well,
actually
sometimes you do.
sometimes I do because especially when I'm setting up for like a live stream or something. Right now a lot of modular communities are doing a lot of live streams, and then it's like, oh, I'm ready to live stream, and then you press down, you're just like, oh wait, I forgot to turn like 5 knobs.
I lost this.
You forgot which knobs you
Yeah.
turned and didn't turn. It's like, oh god, I can't remember the patch.
Well, that's where with the Prophet Fives and the
Yeah,
Jupiters, the kind of brilliance of those was that you
yeah.
actually could save the pad
Mm-hmm.
and it was still analog. And so I think those type of go-to poly analog synths always have like a place. I've got my Juno and I kind of have it because I need presets. And so I'll have my
Mm-hmm.
Juno run all that. But then when I know I want to run my leads or my strangeness, then all my analog stuff is like for that. But when I want to have something
Yeah,
stable, and then I use my Juno. Um, and I think everybody who has a set, they kind of got to have your stable thing that can
yeah.
give you a grand piano. They can give you the pad you need. That however you do that, whether you do it through Ableton or whatever. But yeah, I think you can use all of these tools. You know, I think that's the thing. It's not one over the others. Like I use a vinyl DJ
Mm-hmm.
instead of a CDJ. Well, there's a place for the digital CDJ, but there's
Yeah,
also
of
a place
course.
for the vinyl because it's going to give you a different feel. It is so it's like one doesn't supplant the other.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you can kind of use them all.
Absolutely.
So, in terms of I know Escapism is your 2021 single that I've seen out there. Are you working on other projects for
So
2021?
I mean, I'm constantly live streaming. Actually, I'm in this group. It's called Earth Modular Society, and it's really
Cool.
awesome. It's an awesome community. You have all these other modular communities too, which are equally awesome. But these guys, it's basically an open mic to streaming. You kind of join the Discord. You can search for us. I think we're ems.com. Let me double check.
Oh, well, send me the link, and can I go on Twitch myself. Every probably see my stuff on Instagram. I'll go and take my Twitch and my YouTubes and my Facebook lives, and then cut them up, and then make
Yeah.
videos out of them. But yeah, I mean, I've been doing stuff on Periscope
Yeah,
since like
the
2016.
our website is earthmodularsociety.com, and you'll find a link to our Discord. And what's cool is yeah, it's like an open mic. We have a 24/7 YouTube and Twitch, and basically they stream each other. So usually, we have everyone joins the YouTube, but it pushes it to Twitch too. So if you want to watch it on Twitch, but yeah, it's an open mic. You join, and if you feel like doing a patch from scratch, you can join in and do that. Or if you have an idea you want to share, you can do that. If you want to play one song, you can do that. If you want to do a 2-hour set, you can do that. So it's kind of fun. So I've been
Wow,
just
that's cool. Yeah, I'd love to do that. I mean, I've been doing my own thing, but I'd love to get
yeah.
into a collective. It's kind of been something I've been wanting to do, and I like to focus on collectives. One thing I could do for you guys is like if each person in the collective wants like me to talk to them,
Oh
do an
sure.
interview. I could do that. I did that one time with the Monster Tea Party out of France. We actually had like 3 or 4 guys from this art collective in France, and I actually did some podcasts with them back in 2017. So I'm into doing
cool.
that.
I'll let them know. But in terms of like my body of work, the last year and a half, I've been, I only recently got a modular synthesis. So, I'm still wrapping my head around a lot of the modules and just making them work. And, the live streaming platform is just like an awesome place to get better in general. So,
yeah, it's like I watch these guys in Berlin all the time, and they're like, it's kind of like it's like it is kind of harkens back to the days, back in the 50s when the first modes came out, and the New York musicians, they all did these kind of very experimental shows. They kind of ended up getting like the Keith Emerson's coming out of that, and all these other guys that were into that stuff, but it's just it's cool to see people back into that, because for a long time you just had guys who, the DJs and the EDM crowd was kind of taking over the moniker of electronic music without people understanding the depth of electronic music. It's not just one type of genre, it's multiple things. And I think it's cool for people to hear, like when I do my podcast, I like to bring out like all types of music. And a lot, today I think it's a cool thing to see, people doing CV again. people talking about tape, people saying like, maybe I'm just going to put that directly to a reel. And I'm like, that just really makes me feel good, because not that I'm into just reminiscing on the old stuff. I think it just gives you a different way to approach things. So however you approach music, and I think you can, like I said, all things can happen today. You could use Ableton with a tape, like a reel to reel. You could record something with a Walkman. You could use a plastic guitar. It doesn't really matter. It depends on like your musical capability with it. Is kind of what it is.
I mean, so like I'm just having fun right now. Like, I do have like an EP or an album in process, but I'm really just having fun. Like a standard EP with like 2 to 4 minute songs. But
okay, so you're gonna do some more traditional stuff. I do like the stuff that you have out there right now.
I mean, that's fun to do.
The longer, but the longer form songs is kind of like it's a niche, like I have stuff I do through like my relationship with other distributors where it's 2 minutes and 30 seconds because that's what the market bears, but then when I really do what I want to do, I mean, I actually have rock operas I've done. So I do these concept albums, I do these big thing, and it's just like, cause that's kind of where I came from. I used to go see the Who do Tommy all the way through, or go see Yes do like one of their like one of their 2-hour albums, like every song in the album, like that's it. I'm kind of from that age of people doing those big elaborate, maybe too much. It got people kind of made punk come about because people were sick and tired of Yes, like turning their back to the audience, or ELO turning their back and just noodling for like 30 minutes. But like I was one of those guys that liked that. like the Rick Wakeman was doing like a 20-minute solo on his mini mode. But it's like it is what it is, and I think everybody can take. I think a lot of these modern bands, like they sample a lot of the stuff that I love. Like they sample Funkadelic, they sample, old jazz, Coltrane records. There's a lot of interesting choices made by a lot of people doing interesting music today. I'm always like very keen to hear people taking samples of stuff that's kind of not typical. That's the hip hop. I like the underground hip hop where people are, sampling, like bebop, jazz, or sampling like 1930s like blues records. And then I'm like, that's cool. That's cool.
Absolutely.
But I'll take you up on that collectively.
Yeah,
I'm going to definitely check that out. Just send me a little, just in case I didn't get it down right. Just send me a little uh, note through the chat
yeah,
on
sure. I'll
Instagram so
definitely
I
do
don't
that.
forget. Um, so under so it seems like I answered the question that you've been doing this online stuff so that you don't have to worry about having to do the physical shows because you can't, right? You guys can't really
Yeah, I
do
mean,
shows in New York, right?
there are really no venues open for anything right now. So,
Yeah, the only thing I saw was like in
mhm.
LA they were using drive-ins. Like you had some artists that some indie artists were able to figure out how to do drive-ins. Um, but that's kind of like a car culture out there, so that's more likely to be able to do that in New
I mean,
York. Is
what's
not that
cool
set up
about the
that way.
streaming,
Um,
with the live streaming is that I did a set for Houston, modular Houston, a few months back, and it was, they just needed someone to fill a slot, and I was like, yeah, I'll do it for you guys, and it was like, I was performing for people in Houston, and then 2 weeks ago I was performing for the group in Seattle, so it's kind of like you can, you're touring, but you're not leaving. You're not really going. You
yeah,
don't have to go through you know the rough patches of
yeah.
driving everywhere.
Don't have to have my road case yeah, I don't have to have my U-Haul and all my road cases and worry if somebody's gonna
Yeah.
clip my mixing board. Somebody's, 'cause I actually the problem I had when I toured is like suddenly
Hmm.
some of my pedals are gone. Suddenly it was like
Yeah,
my mixer's gone
exactly.
because it's like that's it's like every time it's like okay, well, what am I gonna lose this time?
Nothing breaks either, so
You know,
which is nice.
yeah. Well, yeah, with the modular gear with the modes, I'm like, okay, am I really bringing my Moog or am I just going to stick with my rolling stuff?
Yeah.
Because then that stuff
I
doesn't
mean,
go
I'll
down.
just bring my microcord and my sampler. That's all I'll take out. Everything else, I don't know. Maybe, we'll see what happens in the future.
Yeah, I've been trying to figure out like I might get like an MC707 and then just
Yeah.
put everything into that and then bring like a key lab and then have everything kind of already
Hmm.
in the 707 or that or in like high force. I've been looking at that because I've been using like a Keystep Pro, which actually works pretty good with a JDXI and a System 1M, and those are like dead reliable because they don't. I brought them around, they get banged
Yeah.
around, they don't really crash out. Um, and the System 1M, what's cool about that thing? That's very much like it's all analog behavioral modeling, so it can pretend to be like an analog synth, but it's digital, and so it works pretty good. And it even has CV, but it's digital, but it can feign, it can
Hmm.
fake being analog. Um, because it's like that reliable, it's a really cool thing to bring on the road because it doesn't really
Yeah,
give
the
you
Kai
trouble.
Force looks cool.
Yeah, then they actually got a song mode now. When it first came out, it didn't have a song mode,
Hmm.
and now it actually does. So you can actually load songs. The only thing I think the MC707 actually can load faster than it does. That's the one problem I heard is the Force doesn't load that fast. So if you're trying to transition from song to song, it doesn't load as fast
Yeah, I
as
mean
you
that's
might
where
want
like
it to.
another sampler, would just do the trick. Yeah.
You got to have something to transition from one to the next, which has always been the core problem with all electronic music. Is why you had too many modes on the stage because they transition from
Yeah,
one
or
to the
just
other.
throw on a drone. Drone and reverb all the way.
Yeah, just throw it in the drone, put it through the LFO, and then switch
Yeah.
over to something else that
My
sounds bad.
favorite is just get a
You know,
reverb pedal, just make it fully wet and a super high decay. It's like I'll repatch everything real quick and then fade it all back in.
that's what I like about the BeatStep Pro because it loads projects like
Yeah.
in milliseconds. And so if you got all these projects on it, you just go boom, 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 and it doesn't skip a beat, and it keeps on running, kind of like the old one, a little
Hmm.
bit before it gets into the next one.
Yeah.
So it feels like a DJ. You can just bounce around pretty good. In the new one, the key step, like the keyboard version of it, is even better because it's fully polyphonic. So that you can do a lot with that. That I think that's a good choice for people doing live shows.
Yeah.
Is, at
There's
least I've
a
had
lot
good
of crazy
experience with
tools
it. But
coming out, and it's only gonna get crazier. So I mean, which is fun, it's cool.
Yeah, okay. I mean, even using my OPZ, with the CV enhancement, running a modular rig off of
Hmm.
OPZ is really cool. I don't know if I've ever used the Teenage Engineering OPZ, but it has these like little step components that allow you to like do multiple like effect type of stuff on every step
Oh, that's
on the
really cool.
sequencer. And then so on every step you have these little micro steps. And you can have up to like 16 micro steps on
Oh,
each
that's
16
crazy.
steps. And then you can have it run an analog rig. And you can have all these projects loaded in like the BeatStep Pro, it seamlessly bounces between projects. And so you can actually kind of DJ with it where you could have like 16 projects built into it. And then while you're in a performance, take project one and then merge into project four and then go back to project 10 and go back to project
Oh,
two
wow,
and
that's
keep on
really
bouncing
cool.
around. And then you can use that to kind of seamlessly do a show into things like the size of a TV
Yeah.
remote, you know? And so it's like, that's like the ultimate, like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm on the plane. What do I have? And take that in the 707
Yeah,
and I'm
that's
all
really
set.
cool.
Um, yeah, it's just interesting today. There's so many different tool sets out there that you can jump into. Since you're a make noise guy, are you thinking about a Strega?
Not, I mean, I think I'm a little geared out right now.
Burned out on
I mean,
them?
I was looking at, maybe, getting a new case. Uh, the other manufacturer that's really interesting to me is the Instruo. I'm pronouncing it right. It's like they have
Oh, yeah,
really
yeah,
cool
yeah. Yeah, I
modules.
think I've seen
They're
that.
always sold out, like on all like the places I look at. It's like, oh well, I'm never gonna get my hands on those. So, but I think I kind of do want to get another case and just slowly accrue those modules. But I think the make noise, I'm pretty fleshed out with, you know,
Yeah, well, you must have a full rig. You got a full
yeah,
like
I have,
case set up, right?
I have like the Morphogene, I have two maths, I have the single oscillator synth, the STO,
It's still,
and
yeah.
teleharmonic, which I love. I love those,
Yeah, I wanted that. That one, I still
and
got to
I
pick
think
that up.
what I'm slowly getting, loving more is the Mimeophone.
Oh yeah, the Mimia phone is something I was like, I gotta get another case. I was gonna go get like a bunch of
Yeah,
their new
like
stereo modules, and then I was gonna get like the Mimia phone looked really cool. I was really I saw something from Loop Pop on it
yeah.
because Loop Pop is like
I
he's like
mean, the
the god.
Mimeophone and Morphogene make the Tempe, Morphogene, and Mimeophone. It's I'll just link those three up. Maybe I'll use like a filter, like a Q pass or something like that. But I can just sample piano riffs, and you can make like these crazy soundscape, like ambient soundscapes, just with those
Yeah,
three.
that
Yeah, those
machine is
three
great for
things.
doing
It's like
that.
you can do some crazy stuff. Like I have,
The Morphogene is like
yeah, like
I was looking for samplers forever, and then I read about the Morphogene, and I saw it like Loop Pop using it, and I said, well,
yeah,
yeah,
like
that's it.
what was it? I have a YouTube video. I've like my YouTube channel has more live streams. I was gonna throw them all up on iTunes and Spotify, but I mean they're mainly just jams. The two I have up there were a little more thought out,
Yeah, yeah.
but the ones on my YouTube channel are more jams. But I basically just took the Morphogene, Tempe, and Mimeophone, and I just mic'd my ukulele, and I just played random, like just like some chords, some strumming, just some
Mm-hmm.
percussive elements, and you can really, yeah, it sounds awesome. Like,
You end up being like the Edge. Because if you ever look at the Edge, he's got this big rack, and he strums like two notes, and he like
yeah,
deconstructs it
that's
with this
basically what I
massive
was
rack.
doing.
It's kind of like
Yeah, it's really cool.
I think that's cool. Like the idea that they're doing that and like the granular synthesis or field
Hmm.
recording. Like I love like take a book and run it over a microphone and bring it into a
Yeah,
Morphogene, and then like the pages coming through the mic you know, that makes like very interesting rhythmic sounds. There's just so many things you can do with the whole idea of field
Yeah.
recording, and then taking like analog filters, like running through, like taking a state variable filter, and then using a notch filter or something, and compared to the ladder filter. And that's what I love about my Arturia 2S is I got these state variable filters. It's totally different than the ladders, and you can do a lot of really interesting percussive things on my Arturia that you don't. My DFAM can do a lot of cool stuff, but there's something about the state variable filter with the notch allows you to do some really interesting
Definitely.
things. And I love Arturia for the what their synths are totally different. It's a different character. It's a little more metallic, more like wood blocks and metallic sounds and kind of weird ambience. It's different than Roland's, different than Moog.
Yeah.
And I use it for what it is, And that's really interesting what you can do today with so many different tool sets and just the micro nature of things. You can get these really small rigs that can do this amazing stuff, and you're like, wow. You don't have to have your big Phantom coming on stage or your
Those
Kronos or something.
workstations. I mean, they still have their place, for some people, but I think.
Well, the RD piano, I still love it. If I want to do one of those big grand pianos, then it's like, okay, fine, that's got to sound good. But
yeah, it's cool.
But yeah, I've been more interested in like a subharmonicon, just because of all the different like polyrhythmic stuff you can do with it. That's probably like my next rig I'm gonna get, just because I think there's a lot of. And I was looking at Make Noise.
I was
Zero
actually
Control,
looking at Zero Control
which
and
has
the subharmonicon. Actually, a few months ago, I was like, "Oh, should I?"
That's a good combination. You could do some really cool stuff if you take those two together. That could run like a lot of modular stuff. I've seen a couple of guys running like Mylar Melodies. He was running like the Zero Control on a rig, and then he was running like a 3-tiered Moog with a DFAM.
Yeah, I saw that one. 32. I saw that video.
And
really
a
cool.
subharmonica. Yeah, and there's that's kind of like a Moog easel.
Yeah, the sub, just the subharmonics. I use the maths to crank out some subharmonics.
Yeah, maths can pretty much do what the subharmonicon does. I saw a loop pop on that. You can get it to do.
I wouldn't say it's
not as clean, I guess. Not as clean,
precise,
but you can get some of the stuff to happen.
In an experimental nature, I think you can have fun with it. But I think if you want, full-fledged subharmonic machine, subharmonicon is awesome. But
yeah, because I never knew if they were actually going to build that, because I was watching the Moog Fest when they did it, and I was like, that was the one that everybody wanted and didn't know if they were going to do it. Because they did a vocoder one year and they never put it out. And then they did like the BFAM, with the brother from another mother, and they never put that out. So now everything from that workshop comes out. And we were wondering, like, are they really going to do it? And then they finally did it.
Yeah,
and they didn't have the money.
I'm gonna hold off on the subharmonicon. I mean, with the matriarch, I could crank out some cool subharmonics.
Oh yeah, if you have a matriarch, you probably, it's something that like it's a nice to have. Yeah, I mean, because if I was like had a matriarch, like that analog delay really interests me, and the periphony really interests me too. And the fact that you can make it like 5 oscillator if you take that LFO and flip it to like an oscillator, then you've got kind of like a little Prophet 5. I mean, it's not in tune like a Prophet 5, but you could do interesting 5-finger chords on it.
Yeah, definitely. It's a fantastic machine. I'm glad I found it. I mean, it's basically what convinced me to get back into music. I was like, maybe I should just stop. But I mean, it's
yeah.
Moog when I heard it, I was, the oscillators. I was like, oh man, that sounds so good. And it's
yeah, my grandmother did that for me because I was kind of getting tired of my Juno, and then I'm like, what's going to keep me motivated. And then I got my grandmother, and then I've been using the grandmother since the day I bought it. And it just brings the life into the recordings. I heard this one story before we go, that like when the DX7 came on the scene, like recording engineers loved it because it didn't take over the mix, right? Like the analog synths did. And then that became like the death knell for all the analog synths, because recording engineers liked the way you could mix it easier and it didn't blow through the mix. But the one thing they forgot was the way those analog synths blow through the mix is actually like why people like it. You know, it brings that kind of warmth and the depth that when you have the digital synths, you don't have that. And that's why I think a lot of people have come, why they want a Moog, you know, why they want a Prophet, why they want an OB6, you know, is because they want to bring that kind of character back into the music. And to have something that's like, that's a real heavy bass line, you know, or that's a real like screaming lead, where that's a really interesting pad off of Prophet 5 or something. There's something about those like Jupiter and Oberheim things that it just, why people, you know, got into electronic music is because some of these iconic instruments, you know, they got them down the rabbit hole.
It's just, you know, you need to, I think with like a lot of, you know, especially if you're running a lot of oscillators, you know, on your rig, it's easy to kind of, you know, suffocate the spectrum. So you just have to be careful and just give everything space to breathe.
Yeah, I mean, that's where you like the pauses or the silences in music, I think are important. Like we get a lot of people get into like how many tracks you're gonna have, and I'm kind of go back to like Prince and Dirty Mind was the fact that it sounded like a demo. You know, the fact that, you know, when Doves Cry, reason it kind of hits is because it sounds like a demo. He didn't keep on layering it. He actually left a lot of space. And if you listen to like, you know, Joy Division or early New Order, it's the space and like they're not doing the overproduction, right? And deciding like where to like leave it bare. I think that kind of adds, when you have those type of synths and things, is to be able to leave the space between the notes so people can kind of feel the full impact of it.
Yeah, definitely.
I think that's like when you're a producer, you have to kind of figure that out. Well, it's great having you on, Bandit, and I'm going to take you up on that your collective there, and see if I can get out there and do some cool things, because you know, and then like if anybody in your collective wants to be on our show for an interview, they can get in touch with me, and I'll feel free to set something up with anybody in the collective. And you in the future, if you have a new release, we always have people come on the show to push their next project. So we do that from time to time. We have multiple people come back multiple times on the show.
Sounds great. So. It was great speaking with you.
Well, this will be out within an hour, and we'll have we'll put a link on for the hyperlinks that you have given me or I've seen out there for you. I can include, and we will be on 11 podcast platforms once it generates, including Anchor FM, Spotify, and Apple Podcast. A couple more to talk about, like Overcast and Radio Public, but pretty much 11 podcast platforms will get this, and we'll push it on our Instagram story as well. Okay, thank you for being on the show, Bandit.
Have a nice night.